The streets of Lagos were alive that morning. The sound of car horns, the calls of street vendors, and the smell of roasted corn mixing in the warm air. Amara stood in front of her new duplex, her heart beating fast. It was more than just a house to her. It was the reward for years of hard work, sleepless nights, and endless creativity as an interior designer. She had poured herself into her craft, taking small jobs and turning them into bigger opportunities until she could finally afford this beautiful home. Obinna, her husband, smiled as he carried the last box inside, the sunlight catching the sweat on his forehead. Before she could take in the quiet joy of the moment, a loud voice cut through the air. Mama Nkechi had arrived. She came in a swirl of gold lace and heavy perfume, her steps confident like a queen entering her palace. Without waiting to greet Amara, she turned to the neighbors gathered nearby and declared, "My son has finally brought me to his house." Her words floated into the air like a public announcement, leaving Amara frozen for a second. The neighbors nodded and smiled politely, some whispering to each other. Mama Nkechi swept past Amara into the house, her eyes scanning every detail. She didn't ask where to put her bags. She didn't even notice the delicate flower arrangement Amara had placed by the entrance. Amara forced a smile, telling herself it was just excitement. But deep down, something about the moment made her chest tighten, as if a quiet storm had just entered her new home. It didn't take long for the first changes to begin. Only 3 days after moving in, Amara came home from a client meeting and stopped at the doorway, blinking in disbelief. The sleek glass coffee table she had chosen so carefully was gone. In its place sat a heavy brown wooden table, scratched at the edges and smelling faintly of mothballs. Beside it was a faded armchair with floral patterns from another decade. "Mama, where's the coffee table?" Amara asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Oh, that thing." Mama Nkechi waved her hand like it was nothing. "Too fragile. This one is strong, it will last. Your children will thank me." Children. They didn't even have children yet. By the end of the week, Amara's modern living room looked like it had been swallowed by the past. The silver-framed mirror she'd imported from Italy was replaced with a large, gold-carved frame that took up half the wall. Her soft cream rug was rolled up and replaced with an old patterned carpet that smelled of camphor. Mama never asked. She simply decided. It wasn't just the furniture. Every time a visitor came, Amara would hear the same speech like a recorded message. Mama would settle in her new armchair, lean forward with pride and say, "My son worked hard for this house. We mothers sacrifice for our children." The visitors would nod, some even clap, as though the story was a warm blanket everyone wanted to wrap themselves in. No one looked at Amara when the words were spoken. She sat quietly, sipping her tea, her smile fixed in place like a picture frame hiding a crack in the wall. In the evenings, when the house was quiet, she would run her fingers along the edges of her carefully packed decor still in boxes in the guest room. They were pieces of her taste, her hard work, her identity. Now they were hidden away like they didn't belong. Each day, Mama's voice grew louder in the house, and Amara's presence seemed to shrink, replaced by furniture, stories, and a mother-in-law's pride. The walls still looked beautiful, but the air inside felt different, like a home she had built was slowly becoming a place where she was only a visitor. Amara sat on the edge of her bed one night, staring at the dim light from the bedside lamp. Mama's laughter floated from the living room, mixing with the sound of the TV. Amara closed her eyes and remembered something her grandmother used to say. "Silence is not weakness, it's preparation." It was a phrase she had heard many times as a girl, but now it sank into her heart like a quiet anchor. She decided not to argue, not yet. Fighting with Mama would only make Obinna uncomfortable, and Amara knew he hated tension. Instead, she would watch, listen, and remember. The next morning, she bought a small, leather-bound journal from a shop near her office. That night, when Mama was asleep, Amara sat at her desk and began to write. Every comment, every little insult, every moment that made her feel like a stranger in her own home, she wrote them all down. The sentences were short, but the feelings behind them were heavy. Day 5, she told the visitor, "This is my son's house. I made him the man he is." Day 12, she replaced the dining chairs without asking. On the bottom shelf of her wardrobe, She placed a slim brown folder. Inside it, she kept photocopies of the original documents for the house, the purchase agreement, the payment receipts, and most importantly, the deed with her name clearly written, Amara Nwosu, sole owner. She had bought the duplex 3 years ago, long before she married Obinna. It was her pride, her proof, her quiet truth. Sometimes, after Mama had gone to bed, Amara would take out the folder and run her fingers over the embossed seal on the papers. It gave her a strange comfort, like a secret weapon she didn't plan to use unless she had to. She kept smiling in the daytime, cooking with Mama, agreeing with her furniture choices, even laughing at her repeated speeches. But inside she was building a wall of patience, brick by brick. Every page in her journal, every document in that folder, was another stone in her silent fortress. Amara wasn't just swallowing her anger. She was waiting, and when the right moment came, she promised herself, her silence would speak louder than any words she could ever say. The smell of jollof rice and fried plantain filled the air that Sunday afternoon. The dining table was crowded with steaming dishes, bright drinks, and bowls of pepper soup. Relatives and family friends filled every seat, their voices loud, laughter spilling into every corner of the duplex. Amara had been in the kitchen all morning, making sure everything was perfect, arranging the plates, checking the stew, setting the table just right. By the time she finally sat down, her back ached and her hands smelled faintly of onions. She had barely taken her first spoonful when Mama Nkechi's voice rang out from the head of the table. "Amara!" she called, loud enough for every guest to pause mid-bite. "Don't just sit there, go and serve food in my son's house." The room went quiet for a second, and then the laughter started. It rolled around the table like a wave, uncles chuckling, aunties covering their mouths, cousins giggling openly. Someone even added, "That's right, a good wife serves her husband's people first." Amara froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. The words echoed in her head, "my son's house." It wasn't the first time she'd heard it, but this time it stung in front of so many eyes. She glanced at Obinna, hoping for some kind of support, a small smile, even a change of subject. But he avoided her gaze, his eyes fixed on his plate, shoveling rice like nothing had happened. Her chest tightened. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but she forced a small, polite smile. Without a word, she stood, picking up a serving spoon. Inside, her stomach twisted. She moved around the table, dishing food onto plates, nodding at jokes she didn't find funny. The guests kept eating and laughing, but Amara's mind was somewhere else. Each time she bent to serve someone, she remembered the folder hidden in her wardrobe, the papers with her name on them. She remembered her grandmother's words. "Silence is preparation." By the time she sat down again, her plate was cold. She didn't taste a single bite. She only swallowed quietly, telling herself that the day to serve more than just food was coming, and when it came, Mama wouldn't be the one giving the orders. It started with the sound of singing. Amara came home one Friday evening to find a group of older women in colorful wrappers filling the living room. Their voices rose in unison, clapping and swaying as they sang worship songs. The smell of fried fish and palm oil floated from the kitchen. Mama Nkechi had been busy. Amara greeted them politely, setting her bag down. Mama beamed. "Ah, Amara, welcome. My prayer group will be staying over for the weekend. We're doing night vigil and fasting. God's work must be done." "That's nice, Mama," Amara said, forcing a smile. She assumed the women would use the guest room. But after dinner, Mama took her aside, speaking in that sweet but sharp voice she used when she wanted something. "My dear, Sister Agnes is the leader of our group. She is an important woman. She will sleep in the master bedroom tonight so she can be comfortable. You can stay in the guest room." Amara blinked. "The master bedroom? My room?" "Yes now," Mama said, as if it was obvious. "After all, this is my son's house. And a mistress of the house must be treated with honor." Her words hung in the air like smoke. The women nodded approvingly, already carrying their bags upstairs. Amara felt her hands go cold. She went to the guest room, a smaller space with no personal touches, and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound of laughter and footsteps in her bedroom. Her chest rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths. This wasn't just about furniture or speeches anymore. This was about being pushed out of her own space, her own home. She could still hear her grandmother's voice. Silence is preparation. That night she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the hum of the ceiling fan mixing with the muffled prayers from the living room. In her mind, she went over the pages of her journal, the dates, the words, the moments. She thought of the brown folder in her wardrobe, the one with the truth written in black ink. By the time the first rooster crowed, Amara had made her decision. She would not stay silent much longer. The next time Mama tried to claim the house, Amara's silence would finally break, and the truth would speak for itself. The day of the fellowship felt like a wedding without the bride. From morning, the house buzzed with activity. The aroma of spicy goat meat stew filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of chin-chin frying in oil. Women arrived in bright lace wrappers and matching gellies, their laughter spilling into the street. Cars lined the road outside the duplex, and the living room was alive with chatter and clinking teacups. Mama Nkechi was in her element. She moved from group to group like a queen greeting her subjects, her gold earrings catching the light. "Welcome, my sisters," she said, clasping hands warmly. "Today we praise God for His blessings." After the meal, she clapped her hands for attention. "Come, let me show you the house my son built from scratch." The women rose eagerly, some carrying their handbags like treasure chests. Mama led them through the sitting room first, her voice rising proudly. "This design, my son worked hard for it. The chandelier. Ah, that's because I taught him to value beauty. A good mother raises a good man." They nodded, murmuring in agreement. In the kitchen, she ran her hand over the countertops. "Imported marble. My son wanted the best. I told him, nothing is too good for your mother's comfort." The tour continued upstairs. She opened the master bedroom door with a flourish. "Here, my sisters, is the heart of the home. My son made sure I would always have a place here. When you raise a son well, he will remember you." Some of the women smiled knowingly, others exchanged admiring glances. Every word seemed to paint her as the backbone of the home's creation, as if Amara's role was invisible. Amara followed quietly at the back of the group, her expression calm but her mind racing. She had watched Mama claim this house room by room, story by story, until there was nothing left that sounded like hers. But today was different. Today, her folder sat on the coffee table downstairs, ready. As the women returned to the living room, still buzzing with admiration, Mama's voice floated over them. "A house is only as good as the mother who built the son to make it." Amara's fingers brushed the leather cover of the folder. The moment she had been preparing for was just a breath away. The women were settling back into their seats, still chattering about the beautiful rooms they had just seen. Some sipped zobo from tall glasses, others nibbled on puff-puff, their wrappers rustling as they adjusted themselves on the couches. Mama Nkechi was glowing, her smile wide, her voice high as she basked in their praise. That was when Amara stepped forward. She walked slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor, a slim brown leather folder held in her hands. The room seemed to quiet a little, curiosity moving from one pair of eyes to the next. With a calm smile, she stood near the center table. "Aunties, mummies, thank you so much for coming today. I'm so happy you enjoyed your visit." Her voice was steady, gentle, but there was something in her tone that made everyone listen. Mama turned toward her, still smiling, but her eyes held a flicker of question. Amara continued, "Before you leave, I want to clear up a little misunderstanding. It's something small, but I think it's important." She glanced around the room, making eye contact with several of the women. "You've heard my mother-in-law talk about how this house came to be. But there's a detail that hasn't been mentioned." The women leaned in slightly. Even the clinking of a teacup stopped. She placed the folder gently on the center table, her fingers resting on it for a second before she opened it. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like someone unwrapping a delicate gift. From the corner of her eye, she saw Mama's smile stiffen. "This," Amara said softly, sliding out a crisp document, "is the property deed for this home." She didn't raise her voice, but the words carried through the room. "And here," she turned the paper toward them, "is the name of the person who bought it. The room fell completely silent. The laughter and chatter from minutes ago vanished like smoke. "I think it's only fair," Amara added, her voice still kind but unshakable, "that the truth is shared." She stepped back slightly, leaving the document in full view. Her heart beat steadily. She had been silent for so long, but in that moment, her silence had finally broken, not in anger but in clarity. The paper lay flat on the glass table, the black letters clear under the light. For a moment no one moved. Then one of the women leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. Another craned her neck, and soon the whole group was inching closer, their eyes scanning the bold print at the top, property deed. Then they saw it, in neat official letters. Amara Nwosu, sole owner. A small gasp came from the woman nearest to Mama. Another followed from the far end of the couch. It was the kind of sound people make when they're not sure if they should be impressed, embarrassed, or both. The whispers started almost instantly, low but sharp. Mama sat very still. Her smile was gone now, replaced with something frozen, her fingers gripping the edge of her wrapper. Amara's voice broke the silence, calm and even. "I bought this house 3 years ago," she said, looking around the room. "Before I married Obinna. I saved for years from my work as an interior designer. Every project, every client, every late night. This was my dream, and I made it real with my own earnings." The women exchanged glances. A few nodded slowly, as if the pieces were falling into place. "I have been happy to share this home with my husband, and with Mama too," Amara continued, her tone warm but firm. "But I think it's important for everyone to know the truth, because a home is not built only from bricks and cement. It's built from hard work, sacrifice, and love. And that's what I put into it long before I became a wife." No one spoke for a long moment. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Mama's friends avoided her eyes, some pretending to fix their headscarves, others focusing on the deed as though it might change if they stared long enough. Amara closed the folder gently and smiled, not a triumphant smile, but the soft kind that comes from finally setting down a heavy weight you've carried for too long. She had not raised her voice, but the truth had spoken loudly enough for everyone to hear. The air in the room felt heavier now, as if someone had quietly closed all the windows. The women who had been laughing and clapping minutes earlier were suddenly busy with anything but looking at Mom and Ketchy. One pretended to check her phone. Another started rearranging the plates of puff-puff on the table, though no one was eating. A few kept their eyes fixed on the folder as if it might open again and tell them more. Mama sat frozen in her chair, her back a little straighter than before. The proud tilt of her chin was gone. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers twisting the edge of her wrapper over and over. This was the same woman who had walked through the house, leading tours and telling stories like a queen in her palace. But now her voice was silent, and her gaze was fixed somewhere far away. Obinna shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between his mother and his wife. For the first time he seemed to see the picture differently, not just the day's events but the months before. He remembered how Amara never argued when Mama replaced the furniture, how she smiled through the speeches that left her invisible, how she served food to a room full of guests even after being humiliated. And now, sitting beside her, he realized she had carried something all along, the truth neatly folded away, waiting for the right moment. It wasn't just a secret. It was dignity. It was patience. The silence stretched, deep and awkward. The ticking of the wall clock seemed louder than the women's earlier songs. Someone cleared her throat. Another reached for her handbag. Slowly, conversations started again, but they were softer now, careful, as if everyone was suddenly aware of the sharp edges of words. Amara sat calmly, her hands folded on her lap, her eyes warm but unreadable. She had no need to add anything more. The paper in the folder had spoken louder than any argument ever could. And in that quiet, the balance in the house shifted, not with shouting or anger, but with the weight of a truth finally set free. From that day on, things in the house felt different. Mama Nkechi's voice was softer whenever she spoke to Amara. No more loud commands, no more bragging about how her son built the house. Even when she laughed, there was a new respect in her tone, a quiet recognition of something she had ignored for too long. The next family gathering was warm and lively, the kind of Sunday that used to make Amara tense. But this time Mom Nkechi surprised everyone. She stood at the door, smiling in a way that felt almost genuine, and introduced Amara to the visiting relatives. "This is my brilliant daughter-in-law who built this beautiful home," she said, her voice carrying pride, not just in the house but in Amara herself. A small cheer rose from the room, and for the first time the praise felt true. Obinna looked at his wife with admiration, a little stunned at how she had handled everything. Amara smiled back, but it wasn't the wide, proud smile of someone showing off. It was quiet, steady, the kind that comes from knowing you've endured, stood your ground, and been true to yourself. Even Mama Nkechi seemed to notice the difference. She lingered nearby, her eyes softening each time Amara spoke, each time she walked through her own living room. The tension that once filled the house had eased, replaced by a new rhythm, a careful balance. Amara moved freely now, arranging her own furniture, welcoming guests, and even laughing at small jokes. There was no need for confrontation anymore. The truth had spoken for her. And every time she looked around at the home she had built, she felt a quiet victory that no one could take away. Not with words, not with power, and certainly not with pride. It was her home, her life, and her peace, and finally everyone could see it.